Most travelers come to Norway for the fjords, but beyond the postcard views, there are fishing villages balanced between sea and mountain, Arctic landscapes where winter barely lifts, coastal towns shaped by weather, and regions where silence feels physical. And most visitors never go that far. Norway isn't just dramatic scenery, it's distance. What people think Norway is. When people picture Norway, they see towering fjords, waterfalls, and cruise ships gliding through narrow inlets. And that version exists. It's the Norway of travel brochures and Instagram feeds. The Seven Sisters waterfall cascading into Ganderjord, the sheer cliffs of Pragto, the organized excursions that promise dramatic views in carefully timed intervals. Once you leave the main fjord routes, the country shifts. The terrain opens, the towns shrink, the light changes. Tourist infrastructure fades, hotels become guest houses, restaurants become cafes run by locals who remember when fishing was the only economy. This is the Norway that requires intention to reach, not just a cruise ticket, but a willingness to drive further, stay longer, and adjust expectations from spectacle to subtlety. The fjords, the anchor. The fjords were carved by glaciers thousands of years ago. Water cuts deep between mountains. In some places, the fjords plunge over 1,000 meters below the surface. Deeper than the peaks are tall above. Farms cling to impossible slopes. Small plots of land terraced into hillsides so steep that machinery can't reach them, where hay is still harvested by hand and lowered by cable. From above, the scale feels extreme. But even here, beyond the cruise routes, smaller villages exist, quiet, understated. The fjords are Norway's anchor, geographically and culturally. But they're also just the beginning of a much larger story. Lofoten, where sea meets vertical peaks. In Lofoten, mountains rise directly from the ocean, not gradually, abruptly. Peaks that would dominate any other landscape emerge straight from sea level, creating a visual tension between water and rock that feels almost unnatural. Fishing villages sit in narrow harbors. Red cabins line the shore. Rorbu, traditional fishermen's huts that now host travelers seeking something beyond the typical Norwegian experience. It feels remote, even though roads connect it. The E10 highway threads through Lofoten like a lifeline, linking villages that once relied entirely on boats, passing through tunnels carved into mountain bases, and across bridges that seem suspended over open ocean. Light changes constantly here. This isn't crowded Norway. It's elemental Norway, where the elements themselves, wind, water, light, stone, become the primary experience and human presence feels small and temporary against forces that have shaped this place for millennia. Arctic North and Tromsø. Above the Arctic Circle, Norway becomes quieter. In Tromsø and further north, winter dominates half the year. Tromsø itself sits at 69 degrees north, the same latitude as northern Alaska, yet remains ice-free year-round thanks to the Gulf Stream, creating a climate far milder than its position suggests. The northern lights move across the sky in silence, herded by the Sami people, indigenous to this region, who have lived in harmony with these Arctic landscapes for thousands of years, following seasonal patterns that predate modern borders. This isn't a dramatic fjord landscape. It's wide, exposed, minimal. The tree line drops lower here and eventually disappears entirely. What remains is tundra, low vegetation, lichen-covered rock, and a horizon that seems to extend forever under skies so vast they make you reconsider scale. It's the kind of landscape that feels older than human memory, and in many ways it is. If you're drawn to destinations beyond the obvious, this channel is built for that. For travelers who value depth over highlights. For those who seek places that don't perform for cameras but reveal themselves slowly, through atmosphere, through rhythm, through the accumulation of small moments that together create something unforgettable. The coastal road and hidden towns. Norway's coastline hides small towns shaped by the sea. Places like literally named the last letter of the Norwegian alphabet, and the final village on the Lofoten Road, where fishing museums preserve methods unchanged for centuries. Wooden houses are painted in muted colors, red, white, ochre. The red comes from a traditional paint made with fish oil and iron oxide, originally chosen not for aesthetics but for preservation, a practical choice that became an iconic visual signature. Fishing remains part of daily life. Boats still go out before dawn. Nets are still mended by hand. The smell of drying cod, stockfish, still fills the air in winter, a scent both sharp and oddly comforting, signaling an economy and culture built on what the ocean provides. This is Norway without tour buses, without crowds queuing for the same photo angle, without the pressure to see everything quickly before moving to the next stop. Daily life and design. Daily life in Norway feels intentional. There's a measured quality to how people move through their days, not rushed, not performative, but purposeful. Design is simple. Norwegian interiors favor clean lines, natural materials, and a restraint that feels both modern and timeless. Wood, wool, stone, materials that connect indoor spaces to the landscape outside. Light matters, especially in winter. Even in cold weather, people go outside. There's a Norwegian saying, "There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing." It reflects a mindset that doesn't wait for perfect conditions, but adapts to whatever the climate offers. Food and regional simplicity. Norwegian food reflects the climate. Preservation methods dominate traditional cuisine: smoking, drying, curing, pickling. Techniques developed out of necessity in a place where growing seasons are short and winters are long. Seafood dominates the coast. Salmon, of course, but also cod, mackerel, herring, and shellfish harvested from some of the cleanest waters on Earth, cold waters that produce fish with firm texture and clean flavor. Cod dries in open air. Food here is practical, local, rooted in geography. There's no pretension in Norwegian cuisine. It doesn't perform or try to impress. It simply nourishes, using what the land and sea provide, prepared in ways that honor both ingredient and tradition. Why travelers are looking beyond the fjords. Norway remains famous for its fjords, and they deserve that fame. But something is shifting in how people travel here. More travelers are exploring further north, driven partly by over-tourism in traditional fjord destinations, partly by improved infrastructure, and partly by a growing desire for experiences that feel less curated, less crowded, less predictable. Improved roads and flights connect Arctic regions, seeking the version of Norway that doesn't depend on cruise ship schedules or tour group timelines. There's a growing recognition that the best experiences often happen in the spaces between famous destinations, the unplanned stops, the conversations with locals, the hours spent simply watching weather move across a landscape. Norway rewards slow travel. It reveals itself gradually to those willing to linger. Who this side of Norway is for. This side of Norway is for travelers who value atmosphere, for those who don't need crowds to feel impressed, who find validation not in ticking off famous landmarks, but in experiencing a place on its own terms, at its own pace, for people comfortable with distance, where summer never gets dark and winter barely gets light, where the same landscape transforms so completely between seasons that it feels like visiting different countries. This is for travelers who read maps carefully, who pack layers, who understand that weather will dictate plans. For those who appreciate silence, who can sit with stillness without needing to fill it. Norway isn't just fjords. It's Arctic skies, fishing villages, coastal roads, and landscapes shaped by ice and time. It's the way light behaves at extreme latitudes, the way weather patterns create microclimates within kilometers, the way human communities have adapted to some of Earth's most challenging environments while maintaining cultures rich in tradition and innovation. And once you move beyond the obvious stops, you realize how much more there is. How much depth exists beyond the surface-level experience. How many stories remain untold in the quiet villages, the empty roads, the vast northern territories that most visitors never reach. Norway doesn't reveal everything at once. It asks for patience, for curiosity, for a willingness to travel deeper. Subscribe for more journeys beyond the tourist version. What part of Norway would you explore first? The Arctic North? The hidden coastal towns? The islands where fishing culture still defines daily life? Let me know in the comments.